Guitar scale formulas, C major, A minor, and related modes. This time looking at the C major scale, otherwise known as the C Ionian mode, starting our scale from the C note located on the top or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling, fret number 8, focusing in on the step from the 4th of the scale to the 5th of the scale. One of our major objectives is to line up all of our resources in the same direction, making them as easy on the eyes as possible from the perspective of the player of the guitar who is located behind the guitar. Therefore, for example, my guitar is going to look like I'm playing left-handed, but no, we just flipped it around in order to mirror your perspective from behind your guitar as though you were playing it into a mirror. Similarly, our Excel worksheet mirroring and representing the fretboard is going to have this as the low or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling, top to bottom, left to right, situated as though we just took our strings and imprinted them on the screen, so we can have, in essence, our worksheet representing the fretboard lined up on top of what I'm doing, looking like I'm playing left-handed, mirroring what you're doing as you are behind your guitar, everything going the same way, allowing us to focus on our objective instead of flipping the guitar around in our mind, that objective being the formula that we're trying to get in our mind. The idea here being we're trying to come up with a practice routine, allowing us to practice as much theory to drill it, repeat it. This is kind of like the flashcards thing, but we're not using flashcards because we want to use the actual guitar, because there's a tactile, that's what I'm looking for. There's a tactile component to the flashcard things here, right? We have to actually feel the thing as well as see the thing. So we're not just memorizing data passively, we're actively engaging in that thing. But it's still kind of like flashcards because we're just basically learning the foundational components, which I would suggest doing once you have a good routine down in your mind, at least 15 minutes a day, possibly in the morning when your mind's still working, so that then you can go to work when you don't really need your mind and you can sit there like a vegetable and hopefully get paid if you're working until Doge fires you from being a government worker or something like that. But not that I would. Anyway, I don't know where that came from. So let's go ahead and let's go through this. So our objective here then is to look at the formula and remembering that the C major, or not the C major, but the major scale in general is our key to line up not just the major scale, but all of the other modes in relation to it, the other modes being important, not just because I would like to play an entire song in the Phrygian mode, for example, but because when I come to the Phrygian note in whatever scale I'm playing, which in this case happens to be the E, I want to be able to build a chord that's in the same key as the key I'm in this case, the C major key. And that means I have to know the modal chord construction, and that's going to be one of the ideas we want to get in play, as well as the idea that I'd like to be able to play in other modes, including and especially the Aeolian mode, otherwise known as the minor scale, which is the 6th of the major mode. So we kind of want to learn that. We also want to learn our same shape. Now notice, I know I'm just drilling down on the same shape, and a lot of people, get in their mind like, how long can you go on about the same thing, the same shape, the same scale? Because you can kind of imagine from a summary standpoint, all of this stuff is like the same, right? But that's kind of like saying that, well, I've already read like the Iliad or the Odyssey or like the Bible or something like that or whatever. And so why are you doing it again? Why do you keep going over the same thing? Or I've already learned like this formula, this math formula, for gravity or something. And I don't need to, but the more you look at it, the more you realize you don't really know it. Just if you just read the Iliad or the Odyssey, you don't really know it. You got to have to break it down, and then you can break it down in history, and then you can you can go on wild tangents about the objectives of this or that and the whatever. Just because you saw it one time doesn't mean you know the thing. The same kind of thing happens with these formulas, but it's a little less obvious, because you would think that if there's only A through G, then what else is there to learn? I've learned the formula. I know this story already. But we want to learn it basically in a lot more detail, because that's going to open up the fretboard and allow us to think about what we might want to do differently on the fretboard. So remember the idea would be we want to learn it by shape here. That's great. That's what most people do on a guitar, because the shapes are movable, and it's kind of like playing, it's just like a spreadsheet, right? It's like the guitar is like an accountant's instrument, because it's all symmetrical, just like an Excel spreadsheet. No one likes most people don't like that analogy, but I think it works good. Like, why does the accountant play the guitar? Because look, I can just cut and paste that shape up here on the Excel worksheet. I can cut and paste it, and it's the same. And it's like, see how everything moves relative? It is not. This is art. This is not an Excel worksheet. This is not math. This is not it. Okay, but it kind of is. It kind of is, sort of. But that offends people, so I don't want to get into it too much. But I'm just saying, like, the relationship is kind of what we're. So we could learn it in a shape, and we can move that around. We can learn it in intervals, which we'll practice here, which means we're going to look at each note and then build the shape around that central point. So that's great to do, and because that helps us build chords. And then we can learn it by formula, which is often useful on a guitar because it lines out one string in essence, like a keyboard. But we don't typically play on one string, although you could, right? You can walk up the string and emphasize, the notes that are in the key as you walk up the string. That's a cool thing to do. That's very fun. But usually when we're playing something, we're playing like with one hand, like one position, so that I'm getting to the notes vertically across the strings. So I'd like to be able to count through the formula vertically through the strings. And so I want to work on that and be able to basically break that formula up between each string. And as we do that, I'd also like to look at all of my notes from multiple perspectives as much as I can when I'm trying to work into the routine. Meaning I'm looking at this one from the perspective of the major, but I'd also say I'd like to look at the intervals from the perspective of whatever other item or mode I'm in, like the Dorian, the Phrygian, and so on and so forth. And I'd also like to name each relative position as I go through it in my little story that I'm going to put in my mind, which is going to be that I want to name each of the notes by the starting point of each mode, because by shape, not by note. I'm not looking at the note. I'm looking at where does it fit in the pattern, because the pattern is movable, just like copying and cutting and pasting, or copy and pasting an Excel worksheet. So I want to learn where the relative position is in the shape, and then name it by mode. And then when I move the shape, I can look at the same relative positions and see how they relate to each other. It's about the relationships, not necessarily the notes themselves. I mean, I'm not really concerned about the E note itself. I'm looking at the E note and how it relates to what I'm looking at, the scale form, which is the C. Or possibly if I'm moving from the second of the C major scale to the third of the C major scale, I'm looking at the relationship between the D and the E, or the second and the third, which I can then look from the perspective of the Dorian, going from the first of the Dorian to the second of the Dorian. Or I can look at it from the perspective of the Phrygian, going from the Dorian to the Phrygian, from the perspective of the Phrygian being the one. So it'd be, those are the kind of things I'd like to be able to kind of flip around in my mind. So as we go through this, note that I can break this shape into what I would call 2-2-1 shapes for the strings. There's 6 strings on the guitar, but the top and bottom one repeat. Therefore, we're kind of talking about a 5-string instrument with a repeat string on it, right? So if I break it into 2-string, 2-string, 1-string pattern that fits within like these 5 chunks that we break the fretboard into, this being what we might call position number 1, or you might call it a G shaped from the caged system. Here's a G pattern. So that's going to be then what I have is a double stop box or house. I've got the 2 note per string. I call this the meat of the hamburger, because if you look at it from a pentatonic 5-note shape, it also fits in this shape, which looks like a computer hamburger kind of thing. And then you've got the box double stop, which is shifted up because there's a kink in the tuning right here, and that's the pattern. And then it repeats here. This is the top part of the double stop box shape. If I do that, then I can learn where the notes live in these shapes, particularly the house, which is the major shape. I've got the Ionian up top. Major scale would start from here, and then below it is the other major mode. That's the Phrygian mode, what I would call mode number 4, Phrygian. And then in the basement, I'm going to call it the basement because this is the rocker. I think of it as like the kind of the punk rock or hard rock metal or whatever mode. Maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong to think of it that way, but easy for me to visualize that they're in the basement of C's house, and that's the Phrygian mode number 3. And then the one that's in the attic that everyone kind of avoids, you're in the attic, stuffed them in the attic up there, is the Locrian, absolute mode number 7. And then the ones that live outside the house are going to be over here. We've got in the double stop part of the double stop box. A is here. I mean, that's the Aeolian. It's also in the meat of the hamburger. In this, right? So it's in 2 different spots if we measure it from this 5 fret chunk. And then we have the D. This is a Dorian. The Dorian here, and then we've got the G, which is in the meat of the hamburger here, which is the Mixolydian. So I'm also going to try to reiterate each of the names of the modes, giving them an absolute mode number based on the major scale to help me identify and orient myself as I'm going through the different modes, as we go around in these circles so I don't get dizzy. Okay, so that's the general idea. So let's do a quick recap of the scale on one string. So here's the formula. I'm going to wrap, it repeats at fret number 12, so I'm going to wrap around. So if I started on this C, it would be C to D as a whole step. So we're going from here to here, C to D as a whole step, and then from D to E is a whole step, going to this E, and then this E is also over here because I'm not going to go past the fret 12. I'm going to stay in the same 12th fret range. So from E to F, which is the 3rd to the 4th, is a half step. So to the F, from the 4th to the 5th is a whole step. F to G, from the 5th to the 6th is a whole step. From G to A, and from the 6th to the 7th is a whole step from A to B, and from the 7 to the 8 is that half step, bringing us back home to the C. Let's walk through that up top here on the top string. This is our focal point, this C right here. So we're going to go from the 1st to the 2nd. Let's do it from here. So here's the 1st to the 2nd. Let's go and bring this back here. I'm going from the 1st to the 2nd of the major scale is a whole step. 1st to the 2nd. We can also call that going from the Ionian to the Dorian. And then we're going from the 2nd to the 3rd. So now we're going to go from the 2nd to the 3rd, from the 2nd to the 3rd, which is the same as saying I'm going from absolute mode number 2, Dorian, to absolute mode number 3, Phrygian. So Dorian to Phrygian, absolute mode number 2 to 3. And then I'm going to say this also repeats over here. So I'm going to keep, I could pull this over here and say now we're going from the 3 to the 4 is a half step. So that could be also named as going from the Phrygian to the Lydian is going to be a half step. So let's do it from open E to F. Open E to F, that's going from the 3 to the 4. And then we're going from the 4 to the 5 is going to be a whole step. So we're going, not that one. From the 4 to the 5. Let's see if I can cut this and paste it. From 4 to 5 is a whole step. So going from here to here, which is going from absolute mode number 4, Lydian, to absolute mode number 5, which is Mixolydian. So now we're on this G, and then when we go from the 5 to the 6, so 5 to the 6, you can see is a whole step. 5 to the 6 is a whole step, going from the absolute mode number 5, Mixolydian, to absolute mode number 6, Aeolian. And so then, and notice Aeolian doesn't always start on A, it just happens to this time, because if we shifted the shape up, any note could be Aeolian if we looked at all the different scales, but the relationship will be the same. And then we're going from the 6 to the 7, from the 6 to the 7 is going to be here, it's going to be a whole step, 6 to 7 is a whole step, and that's going from the Aeolian to the Locrian. And then we go from 7 to 8 or 1, 7 around the horn, back in a circle that we're imagining this to be, to the 1. Boom. We go from 7 to 1 or 8, 8 or 1, which is the Ionian. Okay, so now let's do the same thing, but I want to do it within my shape here. So now I'm going to go from the 1, but instead of going to the 2, I'm going to bring it down to this one here. So we're going to go C to D. Now, anytime I skip the string, it's always going to be a distance of a whole step or a half step, right? Because there's never any more distance, there's never any more spaces when I walk up the string than missing one note. We never miss 2 notes, right? So it's either a whole step or a half step distance. So when I go down a string, I have to think about, that's all the intervals I need to think about if I'm walking up the scale. Am I looking at a whole step difference and a half step difference? And what's the distance when I go from a string to get a whole step or half step? So in this case, I don't want to go outside my shape here because I'm in this shape that's in my, what some people call position number 1. So instead of going out here, which would be a whole step, I'm going to go down here. So I'm going to go from the 1 to the 2. So once again, it's a whole step from 1 to 2. We're back from 1 going down to 2. And how do I know it's a whole step? Because it's going to be 5 notes between the string, 4, 3, 2. So it's 2 note distance. And then I'm going from the 2 to the 3. So now I'm going to go from the 2 to the 3, 2 to the 3. That's going to be a whole step. 2 to the 3, the major scale is a whole step. Going from absolute mode number 2, which is the Dorian, to absolute mode number 3, which is the Phrygian. And then, okay, and so then I'm going to go from the 3 to the 4, so 3 to the 4, 3 to the 4, and then 3 to the 4. So now we're going from absolute mode number 3, Phrygian, to absolute mode number 4, which is the Lydian, and that's a half step. 3 to 4 is a half step. And then we're going from the 4 to the 5, and we have to, instead of going out here, which would be a whole step, I'm going down here to remain inside of my shape. So now I'm going from 4 to 5, and so we have this 3 over here as well. There's the 4, so that's a whole step that we have to do. So once again, I'm going to go from pinky to pointer, because that's what a whole step is. So we're going from pinky to pointer. How do I know that's a whole step? Because it's going to be a 2-note distance, 5 notes between the string, 4, 3, 2 back here, 5, 4, 3, 2. So there's a whole step going from absolute mode number 4 Lydian to absolute mode number 5 Mixolydian. And then we're going from the 5 to the 6, going from the 5 to the 6, going from the 5 to the 6. So that's going to be a whole step going from the absolute mode number 5, which is the Mixolydian, to absolute mode number 6, which is Aeolian. So now we're on the Aeolian, and so now I'm going to go from the 6 to the 7, 6 to the 7, 6 to the 7. That's going to go outside my shape if I go here. So I'm going to do, once again, go back. It's a whole step. Therefore, I'm going 5, 4, 3, 2. There's our distance. So if I put my pinky here, it'd be pinky to pointer. Going from 6 to 7, which is going from absolute mode number 6 Aeolian to absolute mode number 7, which is the Locrian. And then I'm going from 7 to 8 or 1. That goes around the horn, back to 1, 7 to 8 or 1. And that's going to be a half step. So now we're going from absolute mode number 7, Locrian, to absolute mode number 8 or 1 Ionian major scale, and that's the octave up here. All right, that's the general idea. So we've ran through the scale. So now I'm going to go through the scale, but I'm going to break it up when I get to the 4th to the 5th. So I'm going to walk it through in the shape here, but then when I get to this F, we're gonna skip each string. So when I get to the F, I'm going to go to the top string, and we'll walk it through the top string from there, and then instead of going to this F, and then on the second one we'll go to this F, and then we'll walk around each of these strings as we get to that interval. So just let's take a look at this interval real quick. If I look at this E to the F and I analyze this interval a few different ways, when we go to the E to the F, what is that? That's going to be a half step. So we're going from absolute mode number, wait a second, hold on a second. We did that last time. I'm not going from the E to the F. I'm going from the F to the G. That's the one we're on this time. So F to the G. Here's a G down here, and here's a G down here. So when I go from the F to the G, that's going to be going from absolute mode number 4, Lydian, to absolute mode number 5, Mixolydian. From the perspective of the F, it's 2 notes away, which is going to be, we can call that a whole step. We can also call it a 2 note away major second from the standpoint of the F, right? And if I looked at it from the standpoint of the C, the root, now we're looking at it from the standpoint, why would I want to do that? Because if I look at it from the standpoint of the root, that would be like I'm making a chord based on the C. When I look at it from the standpoint of the F, that would be kind of like what I would do if I was thinking of a chord based on F being the root, right? If I look at the C as the root, then it's going to be a distance of 5, 6, 7. So it's 7 notes away. 7 notes away would be a perfect fifth. So it's a perfect fifth from the C. From the F, the Lydian, it's a 2 note away whole step or major second with regards to the F. And so when I think about, so I can think about it as going from the 4th of the major scale to the 5th of the major scale is a whole step, right? Or I can think about it from the perspective of the Lydian. So let's make the Lydian the 1. So I'm in the Lydian mode as though I'm building a chord from the Lydian. How can I do that? Well, it's absolute mode number 4. I need to make it the 1. So 4 minus 3 would be 1. And that means that this one, which is absolute mode number 5, I have to also subtract 3 to, which would be 5 minus 3 would be 2. So from the perspective of the Lydian mode, then I would be going from the position 1 of the Lydian to position 2. Let's check that. So if I go to the Lydian mode down here, now we have F as relative position number 1. I'm still going to call it absolute mode number 4, the Lydian mode. And then absolute mode, relative position number 2 goes to the G, which is absolute mode number 5, the Mixolydian. So then I can see it from the standpoint of the F. I can see it from the standpoint of the F being the Lydian mode. And then when I'm going in reverse, we could see it from the standpoint of the Mixolydian. If I looked at that interval going from G to F, we might do that a little bit more if I start going in reverse here, but let's just keep going one way until we get into a good routine. All right, so now so that's good. So now let's count this thing up. So I'm gonna say we're gonna go from the first whole step to the second, and then a whole step to the third, and then we're gonna go then to the, when I get to the third, and then I'm gonna go to the fourth, which is going to be F, and then instead of going here or here, I'm going to jump back up to the top string and find the one up top. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to say, okay, this is how it's going to work. We're going to go, and then we'll walk it around the top string. So if I was going, this would be relative position 1 of the scale, whole step to 2, whole step to 3, and then it would be a whole step. And then half step to 4, and then it would be a whole step to 5 here, or a whole step to 5 down here, but I'm going to break up the scale and go back up to the top string to this G back here. Right now it's going to be a different octave, but I'm still kind of walking up the scale from just a note standpoint. So we're going one, relative position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we can walk it up here from here. 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So now let's walk that up more closely and say, okay, so what, so we're going from, let's start it from where we make the break. So we're going from the 5, so I'm going from the 5 back up to from the 5 to the 6. So from the perspective of the F, what's the distance? Well, going from 5 to 6 is a whole step. So a whole step is 2-note distance. How is that a 2-note distance? Well, we can count it. If I go above it, then I have to look for the inverse distance. So I have to look for 12 notes minus 2 would be a distance of 10. So if I count that out, it's going to be -5, -6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's a distance of 10, which has an inverse distance of 2. Now, why is that? Note that if I count this out here, it's going to be from this F, -5, -6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So if I measured it from the G to the F, that would be a 10-note distance, which would be a 10-note away would be a minor 7 distance, if you wanted to name it that way. And that means from the perspective of the F at the bottom to top, F to G, that's a 2-note away, which would be a whole step away, which you could also call a 2-note away major second. So that's going to be the distance. So we have that, and let's just walk it up on the scale now. So now I'm on the 5th, right? So now we're on the 5th. That's the mixolydian. The mixolydian is what I call in the shape of the meat of the hamburger, as you can see here, same kind of shape that's going to be repeating. So we're going to say that's going to go from the G, which is going to be the relative position number 5, absolute mode number 5, mixolydian, to the 6th. So now we're going to go to the 6th. So we're going 5 to the 6th, and that's going to be a whole step. So now we're on the G to the A, or absolute mode number 5, mixolydian, to absolute mode number 6, aeolian, otherwise known as the minor scale, which is located at the double stop next to the double stop square. That's where it lives. And now we're going to go from, okay, so we have that A, and that A, by the way, if we also compare it to the major, wait, what did I do? I went to the wrong string here. It should be from the G, this G to the A. Sorry about that. G to the A. And now if I'm on this A and I compare it to the C, what's the distance from the A to the C, to the root? Well, we're behind it now. So whenever I'm behind this note and I want to compare it from the standpoint of the C, I have to look for the inverse distance. In other words, you can see there's 3 notes between here. So from the perspective of the A, from A to C, that would be a 3-note away, which would be a minor third. But from the perspective of the C, it would be 12 minus 3, which would be a major 9. So C back, from the perspective of the C, would be a major 9. So now let's go from the aeolian to the locrian. So now we're going from A to B, otherwise known as going from the 6th of the major scale to the 7, which is a whole step. From 6 to 7 is a whole step. Going from absolute mode number 6, aeolian, to absolute mode number 7, the locrian. And the locrian, as you can see, is located in the basement or the attic of the house, this box. So there's the locrian. And if I compare the locrian to the C major, then from the perspective of the Locrian, it's one step away to get there. So from the perspective of the B, it would be a one step away, which would be a minor second. So if I thought of this interval from the standpoint of the Locrian, how could I do that? The Locrian is the 7. To make it the 1, it'd be 7 minus 6. So it would be the first of the Locrian. The C is the Ionian. I'd also have to subtract 6. So 1 minus 6 would be -5. To make it positive, -5 minus 7 would be 2. So I think I got that right. It would be the 1 of the Locrian to the 2 of the Locrian. Let's see that. If I go to the Locrian down here, if I made the Locrian relative position 1, there's the B to relative position number 2 would be the Ionian or major scale, the C. So from the perspective of the Locrian, this would be the first of the Locrian to the second of the Locrian. And from the perspective of the C, then I have to look for the inverse distance. So there's a distance of a half step between them. 12 minus 1 is the inverse distance, or 11. That would be an 11 note away major 7. So from the perspective of the C, going back that half step is actually an 11 note away major 7. Noting, okay, so that's going to be that. And let's go to the next one. Now we're going to go from the 7 to the 1. So 7 to the 1, or you can call it an 8, which is going to be the half step. So we're just going to go boom, boom, and that's, of course, going to bring us back home. Half step from the Locrian, absolute mode number 7, to absolute mode number 1, the Ionian, or major scale. Let's keep on going around. So now we're on the major, and we're going to go from the 1 to the 2nd. So the 1st to the 2nd of the major scale, otherwise known as going from Ionian to the Dorian, is a whole step. Ionian to the Dorian is a whole step. The Dorian is housed on the double stop. So here's the box and then double stop. So it's the top of the double stop if you go from the box to the double stop. And if I measure this distance from the perspective of the C, now you can see we're going the right way, where I can just say, okay, it's 2 notes away. That means it's a 2 note away major second. So it's the 2 note away major second. What about from the perspective of the D, or Dorian? Well, now that would be the inverse distance. So if it's 2 notes away, this is behind it. So that would be 12 minus 2, which would be 10. So it would be a 10 note away, which would be a minor 7 distance from the perspective of the D. If I look at it from the perspective of the D, it would be the 1 of the Dorian. This would be the 1 of the Dorian, right? From the perspective of the D. How do I make it the 1? Well, if it's absolute mode number 2, 2 minus 1 would make it the 1. To bring it back to the Ionian, absolute mode number 1, I have to subtract 1, which would make it 0, and 7 minus 0 would be 7. So from the perspective of the Dorian, we would be going from the 1 of the Dorian to the 7 of the Dorian. Let's double check that. Here's the Dorian, absolute mode number 1. Absolute mode number 2, relative position number 1 is the D, to the Ionian, which is relative position 7, absolute mode number 1, Ionian, and there's the C. It's a 10 note away, minor 7. Okay, so then we're going to say, okay, let's go from the 2 to the 3. From the 2 to the 3 is going to be a whole step. So a whole step from the D, which is the Dorian, to the E. So the 2 to the 3 is going to be a whole step, going from absolute mode number 2, Dorian, to absolute mode number 3, which is the Phrygian. The Phrygian is living in the bottom part of the house. You can't see the whole house because this is only the top bit. You can see it kind of down here. So it's the bottom part of the house, and it's in the basement. And if I looked at the perspective of how far it is away from the C, right? How far is that away from the C? It's a 4 note away major third, right? So it's a 4 note away major third. How far away is it from the D? Because I went from the D to the E. Well, it's a whole step from the D. So it's 2 notes away from the D. The D is relative position number 2. Dorian, and I'm going a whole step up to the E, whole step from, so there's always a whole step between absolute mode number 2, Dorian, absolute mode number 3, the Phrygian. What if I made the Dorian the 1? From the perspective of the Dorian, it's the 1. So how can I get there? Absolute mode number 2 minus 1 gives it the 1. That means the Phrygian, absolute mode number 3, absolute mode number 3 minus 1 would make it the 2. So this would be going from the 1 of the Dorian to the 2 of the Dorian. Let's double check that. The 1 of the Dorian is D, to the 2 of the Dorian is going to be E, right? And that's always going to be a whole step. All right, and then we're back to where we were. Well, let's go from the one more. This repeats over here, and so now we're going from the 3rd to the 4th, going from the 3rd to the 4th. So absolute mode number 3 to absolute mode number 4. Going from that, let's go from here, from the E to the F. It's going to be a half step, going from absolute mode number 3, which is the Phrygian, to absolute mode number 4, which is going to be the Lydian. Okay, what is this F as it relates to the C? So as it relates to the C, we can count this distance now. It's 1, 2. So if I went from this F, wait a sec, I went the wrong one. E to the F, open to the F. If I went from here to here, that's a distance of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So a 7-note distance up this way, which means that from the perspective of the F, the C would be a 7-note away, which would be a perfect 5th. So from the perspective of the F, which is the Phrygian, if I make it the 1, it would be 3 minus 2 to make it the 1, which would be the first of the Phrygian. Wait, no, I'm going from, let's look at the Lydian. The Lydian, to make it the 1, would be 4 minus 3 would make it the 1. And that means that if I'm going to the C, I also have to subtract 3. So 2 or 1 minus 3 would be negative 2. Negative 2 plus 7, 7, 6, 5. So I think it would be the 1 of the Lydian to the 5 to the 5 of the Lydian. Am I getting that right? I'm getting out of whack. Lydian, the F Lydian to the 5 gets us to the C. That'd be a 7-note away perfect 5th. Okay. What about from the perspective of the C, the major scale? Well, that would be 12 minus 7 then. 12 minus this distance, because it's behind the C. The inverse distance would be 5, a distance of 5. So that means the F is going to be the 5-note away perfect 4th. All right, and then if we go from, and then we're back to where we were when we started. Whew, I don't know, I need to clean that up. I need to get a little bit more succinct on the next one. Let me tell a quick joke though before I try to do that. I'm gonna get this lined out, so we're gonna get this so it's just easy. All right, anyway, so here's a joke. So apparently Disney just hit the brakes on the Rapunzel, that Tangled Rapunzel movie remake after the Snow White flopped harder than like a giant crap pancake flipped off a skyscraper, landing on a perfectly raked Zen garden. That's how bad it flopped. Dust flying everywhere from the pancake hitting the Zen garden, which is disappointing because I was genuinely looking forward to the modern take, for that mythical modern audience they were gonna have on, the whole Rapunzel thing. Something fresh, something that says, "Hey, I'm a princess," and you're dang well you're gonna know it as soon as I open my mouth. That's what we need. Now let's be real. The original Rapunzel, it's all about the hair. Magical, flowing, unrealistic hair that can lift a grown man several stories without so much of as a split end happening to the hair. Meanwhile, I can't even get earbuds untangled out of my ear without pulling out like a fistful of ear hair. So I think it's a little unpractical, realistic, but whatever. It's a story, so I go with it. But Disney was looking to flip the script on that anyways, giving given us a Rapunzel with attitude, edge, and a touch of body positivity. Actually, touch is not the correct descriptor for body positivity. Body positivity is not measured in touch; it's measured in pounds. For how much body positivity we talking here? Well, let's pull out the scales and see how much they put in the movie. Anyways, I'm guessing Disney was working on a bold new Rapunzel, that being a bold Rapunzel, right? You can't get much more bold than bald if we're talking Rapunzel, right? That's about as bold as you can get. So is bald. She still lets down her hair though from the tower. She still lets down her hair, but now it's going to be they had it scripted on the new one that it's going to be her armpit hair instead of like on her head. Plus, the name Rapunzel screams like submissive handmaiden tale woman, and we can't have that patriarchal stuff. Henceforward, she will be known as Pitpunzel instead of Rapunzel, because she's Pitpunzel. That's more like girl bossy. And of course, the armpit hair wouldn't just be long; it would be enchanted. Obviously, glows faintly in the moonlight, smells like lavender and independence. And the prince still climbs up it, of course, but not because she asked him to climb up it, because it lassos him while he's texting something. It just lassos him and drags him in, pulls him up like a confused UPS driver, delivering emotional baggage. And when he finally gets to the top, he's not like, oh, thank goodness you saved me. No, she's sipping on matcha latte, working on her dissertation, unbraiding patriarchal norms, a study in magical philocal resistance. And he goes, can I do something to help? And she's like, sure, start by respecting boundaries, and also repot that succulent plant over there. The hair, by the way, has hypnotic powers as well. It's not just magical, it's manipulative in a fun way, the new modern aged way. One sway and he's suddenly making her dinner, folding laundry, emotionally processing his childhood. It's the first Disney romance where the guy achieves personal growth without a kiss, just conditioning, spray, and mild trauma. I'm telling you, it would have been a masterpiece, tangled, unshaven, and unbothered. She don't need no man, but could perhaps tolerate a yes man. She don't need no man. Maybe perhaps a yes man would be tolerated. The mouse just wasn't ready for it. They couldn't handle the new ageness of it. They're not up to date. They need to get more aggressive with their stuff. All right, let's try this again. So we will once again be going from the F to the G. So from the F to the G, but instead of going back up to this G, let's go along this line. So instead of staying in the shape, we're going to just move up on this string and then take this string around in the circle, doing a similar analysis. So we're going from this C once again, from the 1 to the 2 to the 3 to the 4 is a half step, and then 4, instead of going down here to 5, I'm going to go up here to 5, and then we're going to continue around this string. So it's going to be sounding like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'll repeat that up here. I'm on the 12th fret, so 6, 7, 8, and we're back to the C. So let's try that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 6, and 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. Let's do it that way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. breaking it up right there. And so, okay. So let's do that. And then, so now that's taking it from we're going to take it from the same spot from the F to the G. So we're focusing in on going from the 4th to the 5th. So going from the 4th to the 5th is a whole step. Going from absolute mode number 4, which is the Lydian, to absolute mode number 5, which is the Mixolydian. All right, so that's going from 4 to 5, which is going from F to G, and that's going to be a whole step going from the Lydian to the Mixolydian. So now if I look at that G, what is that from the perspective of the F? That's a 2-note away half step. If I think of the F as building a chord from it, then I'm basically building a Lydian modal chord. So if I think about the Lydian as the 1, then that would be, can I get there? Well, that's 4. It's the 4th mode, so 4 minus 3 would make it the 1. And then if I make the Mixolydian, 5, mode number 5 minus 3 would make it the 2. So from the perspective of the Lydian, I'd be going from relative position 1 to relative position 2, which we can double check by scrolling down to the Lydian, making it relative position 1, absolute mode number 4 Lydian is the F, relative position 2 of the Lydian is now absolute mode number 5 Mixolydian is now the G, and that's going to be a 2-note away major second, or whole step away. So if I compare that G to the C, then so from the perspective of the C, then the absolute mode number 4 or Lydian is a 5-note away perfect 4th, which I can measure from. I'm looking at the Mixolydian. The Mixolydian is a 7-note away perfect 5th, which I can measure by saying there's 5 notes between the strings, and then 5, 6, 7. So that's going to be that power chord. So it's a 7-note away perfect 5th, and we can see that the Mixolydian is located when I go from the hamburger to the the house to the double stop. It's on the bottom of the double stop underneath the Dorian. Okay, so now let's go from the 5th to the 6th of the major scale, going from the 5th to the 6th of the major scale. 5th to the 6th of the major scale is a whole step, and we're going from the 5th to the 6th of the major scale, going from this G, or the Mixolydian, to the A, which is the Aeolian. So we're going from absolute mode number 5 Mixolydian to absolute mode number 6, the Aeolian, and that's going to repeat over here, and that's going to be a whole step. And okay, then the Aeolian is located at what we can call the meat of the hamburger, on the 2-note per string meat of the hamburger, if we want to visualize it that way. And when I think about the step that we just took from the standpoint of the Mixolydian, if I was building a chord from the Mixolydian, it's a 2-note away major second. The Mixolydian is mode number 5. How do I make it the 1? 5 minus 4 would make it the 1. That means Aeolian, I had to subtract 4 as well. 6 minus 4 would make it the 2. So from the standpoint of the Mixolydian, I'd be going from relative position 1 of the Mixolydian to relative position 2 of the Mixolydian. Let's check that out from the standpoint of the Mixolydian. We would be going from relative position 1, mode number 5, Mixolydian, to relative position 2, absolute mode number 6, Aeolian. That's going from G to A. It's going to be a 2-note away major second, of course. All right, let's look at that Aeolian from the perspective of the major scale. So from the perspective of the C major scale, we're looking at the Aeolian, which is the 6th. It should be a 9-note away major 6, which we could double check by saying the distance between the strings is going to be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So if I took this A and I measured it from the C, perspective of the C, 9-note away major 6. What about from the perspective of the one that we're kind of focused on? That's going from the Lydian. So from the Lydian's perspective, what would that A be? So from the Lydian's perspective, it's going to be here 1, 2, 3, 4 notes up. That means it's a 4-note away, which would make it a major third. From the perspective of the Lydian, what if I made the Lydian the 1 and build like a chord from it? Here's the chord construction notes. If I make it a 1, how can I do that? Well, it's absolute mode number 4 minus 3 would make it relative position 1 of the Lydian. And now I'm going to absolute mode number 6, Aeolian. I'd also subtract 3. So 6 minus 3 would be 3. So from the perspective of the Lydian, I'd be going from relative position 1 of the Lydian to relative position 3 of the Lydian. Let's double check that. If I go down to the Lydian, we have the relative position 1 of absolute mode number 4. Lydian is the F to relative position number 3 is going to be absolute mode number 6, Aeolian. And there's the A. What's the distance? It's a 4-note away major third from the Lydian. Okay, because it's a major mode. Makes sense. Let's go from that A. Let's bring that A over here because we can repeat it. And now we're going from the 6 to the 7. So now we're going from the 6 to the 7 of the major scale is a whole step, going from, let's say, the open A now. So from open A to B. And that's going to go from what we have, the Aeolian, absolute mode number 6, Aeolian, to absolute mode number 7, the Locrian. The Locrian is up in the attic of our house or box here of C's house, the major scale's house. And so if I look at that Locrian from the perspective of the A, we took a whole step. The A is Aeolian mode or the minor scale. So that means that from the perspective of the A, if I made it the first, how can I make it the first? It's absolute mode number 6 minus 5 would make it relative position 1. And then we're going to the Locrian. That's mode number 7. 7 minus 5 as well would make it 2. So from the perspective of Aeolian or minor scale, it would be the 1 of the minor scale to the 2 of the minor scale. Let's check that. If I scroll down to the Aeolian, we can say, okay, from the perspective of the minor or Aeolian, relative position 1, absolute mode number 6, Aeolian or minor scale has the A, and we're going to relative position 2, which would be absolute mode number 7, Locrian, which is the B, has a distance of a 2-note away major second. Okay, so that's cool. So then we're going to go from there back home. Well, I can also measure, let's keep it going here. Let's go to the C. Now we're going around the horn to the C, so we're going from the 7 to the 8 or back to 1. So we're going from here, half step, from the 7 to the 8 or back to 1. And of course, that's the octave, or the same note in this case. And it's a distance of 12 notes away because it's going to be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All right, 12 notes away. All right, so it's okay. So now we're going to say, all right, now let's do the next one down and say, let's try the same thing. Instead of going from this F to this F, I'm going to stay in position here, but then I'm going to walk all the way around this string. So now we're going from the 1 to the 2, whole step to the 3, half step to the 4, and then instead of whole step to the 5 here, whole step to the 5 down here. So now we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 back to the C, and if I walk it around here, we could say this would be 1, 2, or repeat the 2 over here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right? So we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4. Whoops, wait a sec. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then again, I'll just continue around getting back to this note. Right, so we're going to say 1, 2, or 1, 2 as I go back, right? So we're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so let's walk that through. So we're going to say, okay, now we're on this G from this F to the G. There is our from going from the fourth to the fifth, F to the G. Let's go here. We're going from the fourth to the fifth is going to be a whole step going from this F to this G. All right, we've analyzed that one already. So now let's go from the G from the fifth to the sixth. So we're going to go from the fifth to the sixth here. All right, and then so that's going to be a whole step from 5 to 6. From fifth to the sixth is a whole step. And that's going from Mixolydian to the Aeolian. So here's the Aeolian. Noting the Aeolian is in the right side of what I would call the meat of the hamburger shape when we break it into our 2-2-1 string shapes. And from the perspective of the G, then let's do. We're going to keep repeating this. So we'll do it a little faster here. We're on the G, which is absolute mode number 5, Mixolydian. We're taking a whole step from Mixolydian to the Aeolian. If I take the Mixolydian and make it the 1, it would be 5 minus 4 makes it the 1. And then I have to also subtract 4 from the mode number 6 to make it then the 2. So from the standpoint of Mixolydian, we would be going from the relative position 1 to relative position 2, which would be a whole step. Let's check it out. We go to the Mixolydian, relative position 1, mode 5 Mixolydian to relative position 2, absolute mode number 6 Aeolian is going to be a 2-note away major second, okay? Then from the perspective of the C, the Aeolian here now is going to be, we would expect it to be a 6-note away, which would be a major 6. How can I measure that? If I go from the C, it's going to be 5, 10, and then 9. It's a 9-note away major 6. 9-note away major 6, as you can see here. So from the perspective of the C, 9-note away major 6. From the perspective of the F, which is Lydian, now we're going from the Lydian to the Aeolian. What's going to be that distance? Well, we could see that it's going to be a distance of, here it's going to be 5, 4. 4-note away, that's going to be a major third. So if I make the Lydian the 1, it would be 4 minus 3 to make it the 1. So therefore the 6 minus 3 would make it 3. So that would be like going from the relative position 1 of Lydian to relative position 3 of the Lydian. Let's take a look at the Lydian to double check that. Relative position 1 of absolute mode number 4, Lydian F. Relative position 3 is going to be absolute mode number 6, or the A has a distance of a 4-note away major third. So there we have that. Okay, let's go from the 6 to the 7, 6 to the 7, and then 6 to the 7 is going to be a whole step. Let's bring it down here. Well, no, I'm going along this string now. 6 to the 7 is a whole step, going from A to the B, or absolute mode number 6 Aeolian to absolute mode number 7 Locrian. You can see Locrian is in the house, right? So it's in the top of the house here, C's house, repeating, and the Locrian then is absolute mode number 7. So from perspective of the Aeolian, we can say Aeolian mode number 6 minus 5 would make it the 1, to the Locrian minus 5 would make it the 2. So if we go down to the Aeolian minor scale, from that perspective, relative position 1, absolute mode number 6, Aeolian is the A in our case, to relative position 2, absolute mode number 7, which is note B, Locrian has a 2-note away major second. All right, scrolling back up. What about from the perspective of the C? Well, the Locrian is going to be an 11-note away major 7, which we can measure by saying it's going to be 5, 10, and then 11. So if I look at this distance from, that's an 11-note away major 7. Wait, what am I on? I'm on the Locrian. Yeah, 5-note away, 11-note away major 7. Okay, and so that makes sense. Let's keep it going. Let's go to the C, and we're going to go back up to the octave. So now we're going from the 7 to a half step to the 8. 7, half step to the 8. Goes from the Locrian to the major, so we're at the top of the box, top of the house. That's, of course, the octave, which we can measure by saying there's going to be a distance between the notes of 12. So 5, 10, 11, 12. We can measure it that way. All right, let's keep it going. Let's say we're going to go from the 1 to the 2 now. So now we're going to go from the first to the second, which goes around the horn, going from the Locrian to, going from the 1 to the 2 is going to go from the Ionian to the Dorian. So Ionian to the Dorian, 1 to the 2, whole step. From the perspective of the Ionian, of course, we went a distance of a 2-note away major second. All right, let's repeat that D over here. Let's put that D over here, open D. And so now we're going to go from the 2 to the 3. So if I go from the 2 to the 3, so we go from the 2 to the 3, and that's going to be going a whole step from the 2 to the 3, which goes from absolute mode number 2 Dorian to absolute mode number 3, which is going to be the Phrygian. Now the Phrygian, if I measure that out and say what's the distance from the Dorian to the Phrygian, from the perspective of the Dorian, we can make that the 1. 2 minus 1 makes it the 1, and then 3 minus 2 makes it the 2. So from the perspective of the Dorian, I would be going from relative position 1 to relative position 2. Let's check that. Here's the Dorian. Relative position 1, absolute mode number 2, Dorian is a D. To relative position 2, absolute mode number 3, Phrygian would be the E, has a distance of a 2-note away major second. Okay, and so that's going to be that. From the perspective of the C, or the root, and I'll look at this C up top, so from here to here, is that right? No, here to here. That's going to be we would expect it to be a 4-note away major third. How can I count that? I could say, well, it's going to be 5. It's going to be 5 distance here, 10, and then 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Distance of a 4-note away major third. Let's go to the next one. Let's say we're going to go from the 3. What am I on here? The 3 to the 4 is a half step. 3 to the 4 is a half step. Boom. 3 to the 4 is a half step. So we're going from here to here is a half step. That's going from relative position 3 Phrygian to relative position 4 Lydian, which is a half step. The Lydian is a major mode. It lives on the bottom of the box or house under the major mode, under the main major mode, major scale. Okay. So from the perspective of the E, we just took a half step. So the E is the Phrygian. So from the perspective of relative position 3, Phrygian, if I make that the 1, 3 minus 2 makes it 1, and that means that the Lydian would be also 4 minus 2 would make it 2. So from the perspective of the Phrygian, we went from relative position 1 to relative position 2, which is a 1-note away minor second. Let's look at that. Here's Phrygian. We have the relative position 1, absolute mode number 3, Phrygian, is the E, to relative position 2, absolute mode number 4, Lydian, is the F, has a distance of that 1-note away minor second. That's the interval that's distinct in the Phrygian. Okay, and then we're going to go from, we're going to go from the Phrygian, we're back to where we started. Let's do it again. So now we're going to go to the next string down. So instead of going to this G, I'm going to go to the G down here. So let's see what that sounds like. If I walk through my scale, we go from the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then instead of going to this 5, or instead of going to this 5, I'm going to jump down to the G located over here on the 12th fret. On the 12th fret. So that should be a half step away from this F. How can I check that? Distance of 2. It would be 5, 10, and then 11, 12. There's the octave. I can start over. That goes around the horn to 1, 2. So that's going to be the octave on the 12th fret. So and then I'll count around the string from there. So we're going to say, okay, that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That repeats in open position. 5, and then 6, 7, 8, or 1. So that brings me back to the C here. And then if I play that around in a circle, so we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That repeats here. 5, 6, 7, 8, or 1, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, skipping up 5, 5, a little lower 5, 5, 6, 7, 8, back to the C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so let's count. Let's go. So I went from here. That's a distance from this F of two notes away, major second. It's a distance from the C of a 7 note away, perfect fifth. Okay, so then let's keep going from there. We're gonna say now we're going from that G. Let's bring that G over here. It repeats right there. So now we're going from the 4 to the 5. Now we're going from the 5 to the 6, which is a whole step. So we're going from the 5 to the 6. Okay, so that's going to bring us a whole step, 5 to the 6. So from the open G to the A is going to be a whole step. Open G to the A is a whole step. And so that's like going from G, which is absolute mode number 5. If I make that the 1, then it would be 5 minus 4 would make it the 1, to absolute mode number 6 minus 4 would make it the 2. So from the perspective of the Mixolydian, it would be relative position 1 to relative position 2, which would be a whole step or a 2 note away major second. So if I go down to the Mixolydian, we have relative position 1 of absolute mode number 5, Mixolydian, is the G, in our case, to relative position 2, which is absolute mode number 6, which is the A, which has a distance of a 2 note away major second. Okay, so then we're going to say, all right, and then let's go from the perspective of the C. The A is a 9 note away major 6 away. How can I tell that? Because it's going to be 5, 10, 15. 15 minus 12, because there's only 12 notes in the musical alphabet, is 3, 2, 1, 0. Here's the octave. We can go around the horn to 12. 12, 11, 10, 9. 9 note away major 6. If I go from this A, from here C to that A. Okay, so then I'm going to go from the 6 to the 7 is a whole step. 6 to the 7 of the major scale is a whole step. 6 to the 7 is going from relative position 6, which is the Aeolian. Relative position 6 of the major scale, Aeolian mode. Relative position 6 of the major scale, which is absolute mode number 6, Aeolian, to relative position 7 of the major scale, which is absolute mode number 7, Locrian. I'm going to try to get my terms right and repeat them in my head. So here's the Locrian. We can see the Locrian is living in the attic of the house, which is a little harder to see because this tectonic plate shifted to the right. See this box right here? Same box here, except this tectonic plate shifted to the right, so it's still in like the attic of the house. So if I say we went from the Aeolian, so from the perspective of the Aeolian, to make it mode number 1, or the first, to make a chord from it, for example, I take the 6 minus 5 to get it to be 1, and we're going to Locrian, which would be 7 minus 5 to get it to, which would make it 2. So from the perspective of Aeolian or minor scale, we're going from the first of the Aeolian to the second of the Aeolian. Let's look at the Aeolian or minor scale to check that. Minor scale perspective, relative position 1, absolute mode number 6, Aeolian, is the A to relative position 2, absolute mode number 7. The Locrian, which is the B, has a distance of a 2 note away major second. All right, let's go from here. We can also see that the Locrian from the perspective of the C is, of course, we would expect an 11 node away major 7 distance. How can I count that? It would be 5, 10, 15. 15 minus 12 is 3, 2, 1, 0, or 12 minus 1 is 11. So this distance from this C to that B, we would expect an 11 node away major 7. And then if I go from the 7 home to 8 or 1, we go around the horn. So we're going from relative position 7 of the major scale to relative position 8 or 1, which is going from absolute mode number 7 Locrian to absolute mode number 1 Ionian, is a half step. And so that's going to be boom. So now that C, of course, has an octave up here. That should be a 12 note away distance. We can check that by saying it's going to be 5, 10, 15. 15 minus 12 is 3, 2, 1, 0. So a 12 note distance. If I look at it from the perspective of the Locrian, by the way, I would say, okay, from the perspective of the Locrian, to make that the 1, to build a chord from the Locrian, it would be the 7 minus 6 makes it the 1. The Ionian is mode number 1. 1 minus 6 would be negative 5 plus 7, because there's only 7 notes, makes it 2. So that means from the perspective of the Locrian, we would be going from the first to the second. Let's look at the Locrian, double check that. From the perspective of the Locrian, we have relative position 1, absolute mode number 7. Locrian is a B to relative position 2, absolute mode number 1. Ionian is a C. The distance is a 1 note away, half step, or minor second. All right, and then we're going to go back on up and say, okay, so now we've gone to the Locrian. Let's go to, or the Ionian. So now we're going from the 1 to the 2 is going to be a whole step. So the 1 to the 2 is going to be a whole step. 1 to the 2. So now we're going from here. So that goes from the absolute mode number 1 Ionian to absolute mode number 2 Dorian. Dorian is housed on the double stop. So here's the box that's been shifted due to the fault line to the double stop, which has been shifted due to the fault line. So here's the same kind of shape up here. Here it is down here. It's been shifted upwards, the bottom bit of it. Okay, so that's good. And so from the perspective of the C, then the Dorian is, of course, the second. So it's a 2 note away major second distance. So let's go from the 2 to the 3, from the 2 to the 3, 2 to the 3 is going to be a whole step. So now we're going from relative position 2 of the major scale to relative position 3 of the major scale, which is equivalent to saying we're going from absolute mode number 2 Dorian to absolute mode number 3, which is the Phrygian, and that is a whole step. From the perspective of the Dorian, if I make that the 1, 2 minus 1 makes it 1, and then the Phrygian, 3 minus 1 makes it the 2. So from the perspective of the Dorian, we went from relative position 1 to relative position 2, which is a whole step. If I look at Dorian, here's relative position 1 of absolute mode number 2 Dorian, which is a D in this case. Relative position 2, absolute mode number 3, which in this case is an E, has a distance of a 2 note away major second. From the perspective of the C, then, we should have the third as a 4 note away major third, which we can count by saying it's a distance between this C, 5, 10, 15. 15 minus 12 is 3, plus 1 is 4. So in other words, 4 note away distance from this C, major third. All right, let's go from the third to the fourth. So let's do it. Let's go do it over here. From the third to the fourth is a half step. From third to the fourth. From third to the fourth is going to be a half step. So we're going from relative position 3 of the major scale to relative position 4 of the major scale, which is a half step, which is equivalent to going from absolute mode number 3, Phrygian, to absolute mode number 4, Lydian. From the perspective of the Phrygian, it would be 3 minus 2 to make it 1, relative position 1 of the Phrygian. 4 minus 2 makes it 2. So we would be going from relative position 1 of the Phrygian to relative position 2 of the Phrygian, which would be a half step. If I go down to the Phrygian to look at that, relative position 1 of the Phrygian is absolute mode number 3 Phrygian is the E, to relative position 2 of the Phrygian is absolute mode number 4 Lydian, F, and that's a 1 note away minor second difference. Okay, so then, and so let's stop it there. I should go to the next one here, to the last string. Let's see if we can kind of crank out a truncated version of the last string. So instead of going to this G or this G, let's go down to this G now. So let's do the same idea. We're going to go from 1, 2, 3, 4. Instead of going to this 5, I'm going to go to this one down here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then from that 5, we got 5, 6, 7. And then I'm going to bring the 8 around. I could go to the 8 here. Whoops, 8 here or here. So let's do that again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whoops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8. Right, and then you can walk up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so let's just do a quick run through on that one. So that's going to be the going from the 5 to the 6 again. So now we're on the 5. We're going from 5 to the 6 is going to be a whole step. So if we go from 5 to the 6, it's a whole step going from this G to this A, which goes from which goes from mode number 5 Mixolydian to mode number 6 Aeolian. Let's just keep on. And then from the perspective of the C, we're now on a 9 note away major 6. 9 note away major 6 from the perspective of the C. Let's go from the relative position, where am I here? On relative position 6 to 7 is a whole step. So when I go from the 6th of the major scale to the 7th of the major scale, it's a whole step. Okay, that's equivalent to saying I'm going to absolute mode number 6 Aeolian to absolute mode number 7 Locrian is a whole step. We're now on the B, which is in the attic. That's going to be the Locrian mode. If I compare the Locrian to the C major, that then should be an 11 note away. So we're now on this B here compared to that C. 11 note away major 7. Let's bring that B to the open position here. And let's go from the 7 to the 8. Going from 7 to 8 or back to 1 is going to be a half step. So going from relative position 7 of the major scale from 7th of the major scale to the 8th of the major scale is a half step. Going from the B to the C. And that's going to bring us back home. So, and that C, of course, is the octave of this C, 12th note away octave. Let's stop it there. I'm getting a little tired. So I'll try to trim it down and get it more succinct as we go. I think I'm getting better though.